There's a lot in the news recently about bird flu. It's a lot of headlines. So let's just go through what we know about bird flu and give that a little bit of consideration. So far, they're finding it in a lot of cattle, but they're only finding it in dairy cattle, not beef cattle. And in the dairy cattle, it's mainly in the milk they produce that a lot of people drink. So they're finding bird flu in the dairy cattle milk. Why is that? We're going to come back to that. So a little bit more about this flu. You've heard the numbers. It's the H5N1 highly pathogenic avian influenza. So what do we know about that? Well, it was first kind of discovered or found or isolated or identified in China in 1996. So that's about 28 years ago. And over the course of 28 years, worldwide, 860 people have been infected by it. That's not very exciting when you think of how many billions of people there are in the world. For comparison, just in the United States, not worldwide, but just in the United States, approximately 300 people a year get struck by lightning. Okay, so yeah, you can do the math. You are way, way more likely to get struck by lightning than you are to get this H5N1 highly pathogenic avian influenza bird flu. Yeah, the CDC and the government, it's all propaganda and fear and control and compliance, just like the COVID lockdowns. As far as the medical and the veterinary community, I think their heart's in the right place. They truly think the virus is causing us illness and is going to cause us to die. And, they want to prevent that, but they've just got it all wrong. Okay. So one of the ways that they get it wrong is the testing for it. When you see the articles that all these dairy cattle have tested positive and been confirmed cases, they're testing by PCR, polymerase chain reaction. So you may remember that from COVID also. The PCR test takes the tiniest amount of genetic material and amplifies it to where there's enough of it that you can get a positive test result. So that gives you false positive test results and make it look like there's a lot more infection or illness than there truly is. Even the scientist who invented the PCR test has gone on record many times saying he invented it for research. If you've got a tiny amount of virus and you want to study it, well, then you amplify it with this PCR, polymerase chain reaction. And the polymerase is an enzyme, and it goes into a chain reaction of just multiplying, multiplying, and multiplying. Well, you do that, and then you've got a lot more virus, so everybody in the laboratory can get a piece of virus to do their research on. That's what it was designed for, not for testing. So anyway, so that's why they're saying the test positive. So far in the United States, only 2 people have tested positive for bird flu, one in 2022 and one just last month or so. And they were farm workers on dairy farms. And they barely got sick. They had a little bit of flu and eye infection, and they got over it, and it was no big deal. So everything's just blown out of proportion, out of context. So going back to the beginning, it's mainly concentrated in cow milk. So let's figure out why that is and why that's important, because nobody's talking about that. So it's already been shown over and over that electromagnetic fields have caused every flu. That includes natural electromagnetic fields like the solar flares we had this weekend and solar storms, and also artificial man-made electromagnetic fields. That's the cell towers and satellites. And in dairy farms, there's a whole lot of Wi-Fi and 5G monitoring equipment running all of the milking machines, and there's little radio ID tags on the cows so that when the dairy cow comes in to a stall to get milked, the machine and the computer knows when it was milked last and how much milk it's making. Is it producing milk well, or is it kind of a weak milk producer and they need to get rid of that cow? So there's all this monitoring equipment. And as more and more 5G cell phone technology comes out, more and more of that is implemented into the dairy farms so they can have better real-time monitoring of milk production and stuff. And we've seen that viruses are simply packets of genetic information that help the body adapt to something toxic in the environment. And that's been shown over and over, and I've shown my 2 favorite books about this topic. This one, Arthur Firstenberg's book, is all about EMFs causing all of the flus throughout history, including avian influenza. And then we've got Thomas Cowan's book, The Contagion Myth, about how viruses are not what we act like they are. They're not these infectious militant things. They are the body's way of adapting to toxic situations. So then, if all this avian influenza is in cow milk, then maybe it's there to help the baby cows adapt to the EMF, right? Why not? This infected milk with the virus in it is to go straight into the baby cow, the calf's immune system, just like the colostrum and the antibodies and everything that all mammals get from their mother's milk, the immunity, the natural immunity. These viruses are there to help the baby calf adapt to all the EMF because the body wasn't designed to come into the world with this much EMF. So in that concept, it might actually be good for us that this flu is in the milk. I don't know about that. So if the bird flu becomes an epidemic or a pandemic, like all the hype says, which it may, I don't know, it'll be for the same reasons as COVID and every prior flu throughout history. It's all of the electromagnetic fields that we're putting in the environment. So we can prevent a bird flu, avian influenza pandemic if we really try hard enough, if we try to back away from all the EMFs and the modern conveniences and the cell phone technology, which we're not going to do. So some people are going to end up getting the bird flu. But vaccines, lockdowns, masks, those aren't the solution. Instead, we need to address the artificial EMFs in our environment. And remember, to date, and maybe it'll change, but to date, over the lifelong history of us knowing about bird flu for like 28 years, only 2 people in the US have ever gotten it, and they got a very mild infection. You're more likely to be struck by lightning than to get the bird flu. So all this hype in the news is just bird flu bullshit. Thanks for listening.